Hello and welcome to Broken Rules, a show about people making their own way in music and beyond. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. We have a great interview with Matt Coles. Matt is a recording engineer here in Nashville, and he and I have known each other for 20 years. And we go deep into his career and talk about some of the people that he's worked with, and really long list of credits that he has. We dig into some of that. He also has a very inspiring story about how he just decided that that's what he was going to do, and he wasn't going to be denied that. And so he was very persistent in the way that he approached his career, and it's worked out well for him. And so we're grateful to have him on the show today, and I think everybody out there is going to find this to be a really good interview and really inspiring. So please enjoy today's interview with Matt Coles. Hey, Matt, thanks for doing this, man.
Hey,
I appreciate it. I was thinking yesterday about how long that you and I have known each other. It's probably like 20 years or something. Got to be at least 20 years.
I can't believe that.
When did you move to Nashville?
In 2003. So I moved
This
here
is 2024, yeah.
Oh, yeah, 21 years I've been here. And I probably met you a couple years after I moved here.
Yeah.
Through Adam.
Yeah.
So
wow. Okay. I didn't know. I thought you were here before that. Anyway, that's a long time.
It is.
Getting old.
I know.
So you are a, as we just discussed, Grammy-nominated recording engineer.
Yeah.
I know you've produced some stuff. You're also a drummer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to kind of talk about, your main gig, I guess, is engineering, and I'm sure that job has changed a lot since you've been here.
It
so
has.
what is it? What do you do actually? Tell me what you actually do for people that don't know.
Well, I'm the guy that sets up all the mics and records the music. And if there's a band on the floor, we have dogs. I set up all the microphones. I record the music. I interact with all the musicians, and I work for producers. Usually producers hire me to engineer their record. That they're producing. Sometimes the artist is the one. So
you're the guy that is responsible for making sure that you're recording when you're supposed to be recording.
Oh yeah.
That nothing gets erased. Have you ever accidentally erased?
Yeah,
erased something?
It's happened before.
Really? Was it a big deal?
Luckily the artist was very cool about it. It was on a Chicago record.
Okay.
And, we were recutting all the old hits that they had and for publishing purposes and stuff.
Yeah.
But it was I think it was the song 25 or 624.
Yeah.
And we recorded bass, and for some reason we were working in two different studios, because horns were in the big studio and then we were in this other studio. And there were me and another engineer were like passing files back and forth, and I guess the bass track got lost at some point. But Jason Sheff, the bass player and singer, was so cool, and he was just like, he just grabbed the bass. He's like, screw it, I'll just lay it down real quick again, and he just nailed it. And it was no big deal, but
it could be though, right?
It could be a very big deal, yeah. And there's always there's been things that have been like kind of lost online. And I've gone back to like Dropbox and deleted files and found them and recovered them, thank God.
Yeah.
Because another job of the engineer, unfortunately, is to hang on all the files.
Right.
Because I don't know why that became on us. But
you have to you're the archivist.
Yeah. And it's kind of like an unspoken thing, It's not like the producer and the artist are like, okay, you hang on to the files and we'll back them. It's like, you just know as the engineer, okay, I need to back this stuff up. I need to keep a copy of it in my closet somewhere, or in a cloud online or something.
Has anybody called you years later like, hey, Matt, I need this?
Yeah,
and you're like, what?
Absolutely. That's when I had to go back in a Dropbox and oh God, I pretty got it still there. I went and deleted files, and been like a year and a half or something.
Wouldn't you think that the record label or the producer they'd want to, I mean, I'm sure they do ask for it, right? From you, like when the project's done, or no?
Not necessarily.
Really?
It's weird. I mean,
because back in the tape days, they would have kept those masters, right?
you're going to have a master and a safety, and those drives are going to travel with the producer usually.
Yeah.
But the producer I worked for all the time for Warner Brothers, Scott Hendricks, he's old school. He was an engineer himself back in the day. So he knows he really knows what he's doing and what is really happening. And there's a lot of producers, younger producers now, that they don't understand their role. They don't understand all the ins and outs. They're songwriters that, I get to produce a record now because I wrote a song.
Yeah.
It's like, they don't know.
Yeah.
They just don't know all the details and stuff. So it's kind of up to the engineer to kind of be like, I'll keep this on the rails for you.
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my next question. So because that's why people, what is it that makes you successful, that makes people want to hire you versus somebody else?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Obviously you make it go smooth.
Yeah, you got to make it go smooth. You got to be a cool hang. You got to, every single detail goes into it,
and you have to be fast. When somebody's tracking like a vocal or something, they want to go back. They don't want to be waiting on you.
Yeah, definitely. That goes without saying. Like, you have to kind of know what you're doing. You know? There's kids coming out of the Belmont and stuff that they're fast on Pro Tools, but they're not fast. They don't understand the pace of a session and stuff. So, I don't know. There's details like that, obviously, that need to be there. I
can imagine that. And there's a lot of pressure, probably. You have to be able to deal with the pressure.
It can be. Yeah.
Especially if you're tracking a full band or whatever, and you got 6 people in there, and you could cause it to fall apart really quickly if you don't have your stuff together.
Definitely. Yeah. Those are things I don't really think about much anymore. I used to get real nervous before tracking sessions when I was younger, and I don't really anymore. And I think it comes in preparedness. The night before or the day before, I know I'm ready for downbeat, so I can go to bed that night and wake up. And the rule of thumb, from a lot of engineers is, or assistant engineers too, is that, if you were sick that day and couldn't make it in, they could call another engineer in. Everything is well documented, ready to go for downbeat. The template's set, you're not doing anything in the morning. So that will really make a session go smoothly. If you have your, all your,
you going in the
all
day
your
before,
angles
the
together.
night before.
Yeah.
So let's go back a little bit then. How did you decide to get into this? I know you're a musician, and I assume you were playing drums as a kid, but what point did you decide, I'm going to get into being an engineer in the recording side of things?
It was an epiphany. It was weird. Like, I was out in San Diego. I was playing in bands, and I, strangely enough, ended up in a country band out there, on top of many others. But they came to Nashville to record, and I had been in studios ever since I was 13 as a drummer recording.
Yeah.
And, so I was familiar with studios, but I came to Nashville with that country band just for fun. Like, I didn't think I was going to play on the record because they had session players, and that's kind of the way it goes in Nashville. But I witnessed what was going on, and it's funny. I saw the drummer and the musicians carrying heavy amps and drums in the back door of the studio, and everybody's setting up and getting ready to go. And then I'm sitting at the console by the, like the producer station, and I'm totally green to the whole pace of everything. And I see this engineer, this old, cool engineer. His name was George Clinton. He walked in.
George Clinton?
Yeah, his name was George Clinton. He's an old country engineer. He passed away years ago, but he was so cool. And he just walked in with a cup of coffee and was just like, all right, what are we doing today, boys? And I was just kind of like, do I want to be that guy, or do I want to be one of these guys? I've been one of these guys my whole life. It's like, I was interested in recording. I was reading manuals and stuff and doing 4-track and 8-track recordings and all that. But I kind of, something snapped into place at that moment. I kind of realized, I think I want to be sitting in this seat.
Mm-hmm. So did you stay in Nashville then?
I went back to San Diego, and a month later, literally, I was enrolled at SAE Institute down on the row. And got an apartment here, and I moved here because I was like, that was incredible. this is where it's going on. I don't know what I'm doing out in San Diego. I mean, I love San Diego, but
did you go out there for school?
Yeah, I was out there going to school and just surfing and hanging out.
You're from Indiana.
Yeah.
Originally. Yeah. Okay.
Up by Chicago. Yeah, I grew up in Indiana.
Wow. That's crazy. I mean, we've talked to a lot of people on here, and sometimes it's really that's like, what you can see. This is my life. You have, like you said, you have an epiphany, and then a month later, you're here.
Yeah, I had left home. I was out in San Diego. I was on a mission at that point to be like, I'm going to do music. I want to be a professional. I wanted to be a session drummer or like a professional drummer. Like, I don't care. I'll go play for Britney Spears. I just wanted to be, that guy that was, doing it.
Yeah.
On a professional level. And I just kind of realized how much of a hustle that was.
Yeah.
To try to be a musician. And I found I've always, everyone loves the studio.
Yeah.
And so I just found that I'd rather just kind of mosey in with a cup of coffee than lugging drums and fighting and scratching and clawing for a gig,
Right. And I'm sure there's still some of that, especially in the early days of trying to get work for what you were doing.
Yeah, it's definitely a hustle too. I mean, but it's a different thing, I mean, I don't have to go out and schmooze and hang out at bars and meet people and try to get in bands and build relationships that way with songwriters and stuff. I can just I went to a big studio out of SAE. I went to Soundstage.
And SAE is an engineering school.
Yeah, it's one of those engineering schools that it was a 9-month crash program. Crash course program. It was still cheap back then too. Gosh, I can't imagine paying like, 30, 40 grand for these engineering degrees that these kids have now. It's like, because you still have to go through the ranks, and really learn how to be an engineer.
Did they place you in like an internship or something there? Or?
No. Well, I went and got my own internship at Soundstage while I was still going to school. And Soundstage we shared a parking lot with Soundstage. Okay. So I was down on Music Row. But I knew that I was a huge Mark Knopfler fan, Dire Straits fan. I knew that Chuck Ainley had his studio right there. I'd see him walking out to his car. So I'm like, I want to work with that guy. I want to be around that music. That's cool.
Did you just walk up to him in the parking lot?
No, I didn't. But I walked up. I did print up a little resume and went and handed it to the front desk people at Soundstage. And I just kept on going back. Like a few days later, I went back to check in on it. Because I saw him put my resume in a stack this big. I was like, oh God. So I kept on going back, and like, I think the third or fourth time I went back over like a 2-week span, they finally were just like, yeah, well, let me see your resume here. And he pulled it out and he looked at it and he kind of set it down. He's like, well, I'll show you around,
Yeah.
He didn't tell me, you got an internship. He just said, I'll show you around.
Yeah.
And it just kind of dawned on me like, oh, I think I'm in.
Yeah.
And I got in, and I got to work with Chuck a little bit and develop a working relationship with him when I was younger. And but then I went on to Sound Kitchen and did the night manager shift, which is a paid internship.
Yeah. And that's probably when we met, because we had mutual friends that worked there.
Yeah. And that's when I really started getting it and becoming part of, that's where you start building relationships and becoming part of a team and a family, of a studio thing.
Were you, as the night intern there, what was your job?
Oh, I hated it, man. I mean,
were you setting up and tearing down? And,
I would set up and that was the assistant engineer's job, but
so you were below the assistant engineer.
Oh yeah. I made coffee. Yeah, I made sure there's paper towels in the bathroom. I went on food runs for all the artists and clients and
you probably kept your mouth shut.
Oh yeah. You don't. Yeah, if you're like, it was rare that you got to go in a control room. It was neat because if you did go in a control room during like a tracking session or something, you saw all the musicians and heard what was going on coming out of the speakers and saw the engineer. These fantastic world-class engineers doing their thing with these incredible musicians, and it was just like,
and probably some pretty big name artists that
famous people, because those were major studios where multiple rooms were going on. You'd have Brookston down in the back, Keith Urban over here, Montgomery Gentry, and and then have some weird rock band in there, I don't know. It was really fun and wild.
And how do you work your way up from that? Just by being there and getting the relationships, and
that's when you start. Yeah, because you see these people every day. You meet the assistant engineers that were interns in your shoes a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And developing relationships with them. And I really pushed to, I would help the assistant engineers set up. They would let me come in and help them set up microphones and tear sessions down.
Yeah.
And I did everything I could just to be in the rooms, and help those guys. I'd stay up all night. There was many nights where I didn't go to bed. I'd get off work at like 11:30 or something at night.
Yeah.
And I would help an assistant engineer because the assistants were waiting around to get into the rooms because people worked late back then.
Yeah.
You'd work till like 10 or 12 or something.
Yeah.
And then they had to do a 4-hour setup that night for downbeat in the morning.
Right. Turning the room over for the next day.
Yeah. And I would just stay up all night with them, helping them. And, I did that for like, 6 months. I would just hang and do whatever I could to hang. And I think people started noticing, the engineers started noticing, everyone was like, man, this guy's working his tail off. And
you were hungry. You wanted it. Yeah.
I wanted it. Yeah. I was on a mission. I moved here from San Diego. I was 25. I had been away from home for a while at that point.
Yeah.
I just I was on a mission, to accomplish something.
So do you remember what your first actual gig where you were maybe assistant engineer, or you were actually, do you remember who that was?
Yeah. Brent King.
Brent King. I don't know that name.
He was a Christian engineer.
Okay.
And my very first official thing was with him, where I officially was the assistant engineer.
Yeah.
Now, I was cruising around with Steve Marcantonio and JC Monterosa. And JC really took me under his wing and JC was Steve's assistant, and he took me under his wing and let me help out. And Steve started noticing that too. So I got to go to a different studio called the Tracking Room.
Uh-huh.
And my first session I got to really hang on and help out on full time was Kenny Chesney.
Okay.
So,
and you mentioned JC, and of course our other friend Adam Dean. I was friends with all of you guys, so I remember all of that and how, though you guys, you did work your butt off for a long time.
The music industry was different back then too, though. Whereas,
I feel like, is that even an opportunity for somebody today? Are there even studios like that?
Well, there's
today?
Blackbird and there's Ocean Way. Ocean Way's connected to Belmont. So kids kind of get to experience that, but they don't. It's not like those kids get to go hang out on major tracking sessions, or Belmont was doing that for a little while at Ocean Way. I remember working over there with some people, and like there would be kids in the room and half of them wouldn't be paying attention or being disruptive, like watching videos. They just totally did not get anything. So I was like, get the hell out of here.
Yeah. So how has it changed? I feel like when our class or whatever, when we all came to Nashville, our friend group or peer groups or whatever, it was kind of at the tail end of something. I sense that just as a, trying to write songs and the music business was changing then, and it's definitely changed now. So how has that affected what you do?
Well, I like it for me personally better now. I get to go home for dinner and have a normal life. I think a lot of people tend to work that way now. They're not
doing late nights all night.
Yeah. Sometimes I do, if it needs to be done, but, I'm not sure. I've set my life up in a way that works for me, which is kind of, I feel really lucky because I still work at a really cool studio.
Yeah.
I get to work with amazing musicians and artists and, but, I don't have to have sleepless nights and not see my wife and all that kind of stuff.
It's a weird thing, and the whole business. CDs were still a thing back then, and when we all first got here, and that's just different now. I mean, there's probably a lot of jobs that have been completely eliminated out of the music industry that just don't even exist anymore.
Well, and the thing too is like all the artists and everything is privatized now, you know, like all, because I think a lot of the technology has changed, so people can make records in little overdub studios, and they can, and half the stuff's programmed now, you know, on the big radio stuff. And if, you know, you still, those big tracking rooms like Ocean Way or Blackbird or in places like that, they, you know, they still get booked all the time there's plenty of stuff that needs to be done, like symphonic stuff for like video games and all that stuff where there's, and, you know, full tracking sessions still need to happen in big rooms.
Yeah.
But they only do it for one day and then they go back and do all the overdubs in their little overdub studios and everything. And that really changes the whole community of it too, of the music industry. Before you'd see session players all the time, you know, multi-room facility places, you know, there'd be tons of musicians there, would be producers there would be artists there, and everybody would kind of mingle a little bit, cross paths. And so that's not happening as much, and I think that's kind of killing something magic about the music industry. I don't know. I mean, not to sound pessimistic, but it's just, there's something gone that was there before. I think.
Yeah. It's this. There's so much, because anybody can make a record in their bedroom or whatever now. It's just so much saturation. I mean, you and I talked a little bit about this yesterday, and I've heard different figures. I don't know, but it's something like a ridiculous number of songs getting uploaded to Spotify every day, like hundreds of thousands or millions or whatever.
Millions a day.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
And that's tough, you know. It's tough. Some of that's probably good, and the stuff that's good, it's hard for it to get out there. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And a lot of it is not good. Yeah. And it's just I don't know. That's a weird, there's good and bad side to it. I mean, it's certainly, you know.
Well, the labels, A&R and the labels, they used to be gatekeepers, you know.
Right.
And it used to be that they were fans of music and they would let good music in and, you know, filter out all the crap.
And they would develop people. And now they don't. It's like you got to walk in with 4 million TikTok followers and all that. And then at that point, what do you even need the label for?
Exactly.
But that's what they're not touching you. It's not like, oh, look at this guy. He's really talented. Let's go develop him and let him not, you know, let him have a couple of records that don't do that well.
Yeah.
That's just not even done anymore.
No, they've already made the record. They're, you know, or they've already made half of it or made a few. You know, another thing too is people are recording songs 3 at a time now or 1 at a time. Yeah. And people don't make records anymore like they used to, you know.
Right.
Which also kills the studio, you know, industry a little bit.
Right. Yeah. It's different, but I mean, it's the world that we live in. And but you've done well for yourself to be able to, you know, you're still in it and you're making a living doing it. Yeah. And you're making good stuff.
I feel like I've really landed at some cool opportunities. So I
was looking at your all music thing. And we can talk a little bit about that too. But I'm just going to read some names. This is going back. So some of these, I think you were probably an assistant on. Some of them just says mixing. Some of them says assistant. Some of them says an engineer. I just read some of these names.
Yeah.
See if you remember all of these things. Okay, this is from 2007. I guess this is an album called Fifth Gear by Brad Paisley.
Oh, yeah.
Big and Rich.
Yeah.
Jimmy Hall. That guy's a fantastic singer. I'm a huge Jimmy Hall fan.
Yeah, that was awesome.
How is that? I bet he just knocks it out. He just goes in and.
I mean, he was so cool. I really didn't. The funny thing is another pitfall that can be devastating to an engineer's career is not doing their homework.
Right.
And I didn't know.
You didn't know who he was.
I mean, I knew Jimmy Hall was like, you know, but I didn't know he was such a badass that he was. And I realized that once he started singing and playing harmonica and stuff, and but it was just kind of like, who is this guy again? This guy is awesome.
Yeah.
And, just ignorant. But
you found out real fast.
I found out real fast that he's a legend.
Great singer. Brooks and Dunn.
Yeah.
There's something called The Beautiful Republic.
I don't remember that.
Josh Turner.
Yeah.
John Lanier. Played drums,
who's that guy?
2007. Whew.
I don't know about that. I don't remember that.
Kenny Chesney.
Yeah.
Big and Rich. Again, let's see who else is on here. Juliana Hough.
Yeah.
Willie Nelson.
Yeah, that was cool. I
Yeah.
always remember that. I got to play his guitar.
Trigger.
Yeah. He was, I don't know, his bus was out in the parking lot and stuff, and he was out there, and we were set up and ready to go for a session, and his bus driver comes in with a guitar case.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's it. That is the Trigger, guitar.
Yeah.
And he sets it down out in the tracking room, and I kind of follow him out there just because I want to see him open the case. And he opens it up and he's like, "You got a tuner? Can you tune this thing?" I said, "Yeah." He's like, "All right, cool." And he walked out, went back out to the bus, and I'm just sitting there with Willie Nelson's guitar, asked to tune it, and
cool.
so I'm playing it.
Did you sing Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain?
No, I did not. But the funny thing is I jumped on the opportunity a little too quick because I said, "Yeah, I'll tune it." And I was like, "Shit, I don't have a tuner." So I went to the piano. And I was going to tune it by ear. I'm like, this isn't going to work, And I was tuning the knobs and boom. Yeah. And these knobs are creaking and stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to break it. Oh my God.
And that thing's like 1 second from falling all the way apart anyway.
Yeah.
Like.
And when it's all lacquered up,
I would be afraid to touch it.
Yeah. I was a little scared, but I went, and it was a multi-room facility at Sound Kitchen. And I had a buddy they were mixing Rock Band in one of the other studios. And I knew they had a tuner.
Yeah.
So I went over, I'm like, "Hey man," the assistant, he was a buddy of mine. I'm like, "Steve, come here, man. Do you have a tuner?" He's like, "Yeah, sure." I'm like, "You got to come with me." And he's like, "What?"
I'm like, guitar,
man. And he played it, I played it, and it kills me that I didn't think to take a picture.
Really?
I could have had a picture of me playing Willie Nelson's guitar, but I just wasn't. I never thought like that,
Yeah.
I kind of regret it now. I wish I would have documented more stuff. But
so you remember that one?
The funny thing about working at those rooms too, and all these artists is, I have tons of guitar picks at home.
Oh, really?
Like I have Willie's guitar pick that he used on that session.
Oh, cool.
And so I took that guitar pick and I had the CD. I bought the CD and I put it in the actual cover and keep it somewhere.
That's awesome.
I got, and I had a Taylor Swift pick from when she was in the studio. And
okay, did you work with Taylor Swift long ago when she was first?
She still had the sparkly guitar. She was still country. I think it was like her second record or something.
Okay.
But I had a Taylor Swift guitar pick, and there was a little girl at this school for the blind that I was dating. This girl, and her mom was going to school there or something. And I'm like, well, I had it in my pocket for some reason. I always had picks on me because
that probably did you some favors with that woman, right?
No, well, I didn't really think of another thing. I just didn't really think it was that big of a deal. And I was like, oh, here's a guitar. Oh, this was Taylor Swift's guitar pick. I picked it up after she left the session, and now I think, dang, man, that was a hell of a gift. I hope they hung on to it. But I have so many guitar picks at home from all these artists I worked with. It's funny.
Let's see who else. Amy Grant.
Yeah, that was cool.
Faith Hill.
Yeah, that was on a mixing project with Brendan O'Brien.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and he was awesome.
Yeah.
And I assisted him mixing.
He did a bunch of Springsteen records, a few Springsteen records in the early mid 2000s.
Yeah, I mean he was
Pearl Jam.
Yeah. Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, all those cool sounding records. That guy made some. Rage Against the Machine. He produced all that 90s, rock, hard rock stuff. He's a beast, man.
Fun to work with.
Yeah, a very cool guy.
Let's see who else. Kermit Lynch.
That was cool. I remember that one very well too. I did a couple records with them, and it was Ricky Fattar producing. He was the drummer for the Ruddles. And they were from this Bay Area, and they were also very connected to Bonnie Raitt. So there was a lot of Bonnie Raitt's band in there.
Yeah.
Ricky Fattar is such a cool guy and so good at drumming. I mean, he just has this really unique thing that he's cool. He's a cool dude. And Kermit Lynch is so cool too. He is a huge wine importer. And
really?
I love wine. Me and my wife love wine.
Yeah.
I've always loved wine. And he's getting to do a couple records with him was really cool because we'd have all the session players, like all the big, cool band going on. And he'd bring wine, like he'd bring cases of wine. And we'd camp out for like 3 or 4 days in a room and just track a record of all these cool songs. He was so laid back, so cool. And at lunchtime, he'd pour everybody wine. And, it was fun. That was a fun group to work with.
Yeah. Let's see who else is on here. Dolly Parton.
Yeah. I've worked with Dolly lots of times.
Really?
Yeah.
How's that?
It's great. She's incredible. I mean,
she just goes in and knocks it out too, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. She's
a vocalist. I mean,
yeah. She's, I think she has her microphone that she likes to use and her setup at her studio and record label headquarters. But I've definitely, well, that's not true. I mean, we cut her at Ocean Way and I cut her on it. She came in and sang on a Chicago record.
Okay.
That I was doing with Phil Ramone, which was incredible.
Wow. Phil Ramone producing.
Yeah. Camped out with Chicago and Phil Ramone for a month in a studio. And just like, it was funny because working with Chicago, did a couple records with them. And the cool thing about working with those bands, like same with the Eagles, is like they're so established. They have so much money and they'll just almost keep you feel like you're on staff a little bit because they always just have so much going on that it's like, we're going to do this. And then next we're going to do this. And then next we have this coming in. Oh, can you get these files from this other thing? Or Robert Lamb, I mixed Robert Lamb thing real quick off shooting from the hip because on a solo record thing he did. It was really cool working for bands like that because they just they had a lot going on. They could keep you busy. Yeah.
Side projects or like if they're already working with you.
Yeah. It's a thing. It's like you get part of their camp, So it's really cool. But working with Phil Ramone for a month, God, sitting by that guy, watching him produce a band like Chicago, master, at just keeping things on the rails. And he was so slick and cool and interesting and knowledgeable. Just
and open and sharing and you can learn from him.
Oh my gosh, yeah. He was the nicest guy in the world. Yeah.
A couple more here. The Judds.
Yeah, that was cool. Camped out for a summer with them, with Winona and Mama, the mom.
Yeah.
God. I'm having a brain fart. I can't. She was so nice, man.
Naomi.
Yeah. She was. I really liked her. She was sweet.
Ronnie Dunn, Chris Ogle, Blake Shelton, Uncle Cracker.
I've done 2 records on him, man. And one song, I think it was called Saturday Night or something. It was on the radio for a while. But I did before that, I camped out for like a year off and on. Uh-huh. And that was kind of like my first big break. I worked with this producer that produced all the Uncle Cracker stuff. Uh-huh. And great guy, really talented bass player, talented producer. But he kind of gave me a chance. I was still an assistant engineer, staff engineer at the Sound Kitchen. And that's kind of the way the pop world works, I've realized. It's like these producers come in and you're just an engineer, so that's what you do. And so I would set up microphones and dial in drums for them. And I did a lot of engineering on that record. And then it was kind of me and him taking the record. Like I did a rough mix for him on something and sent it back to him in LA. And he was like, man, this sounds pretty good. You want to mix the record? I'm like, yeah. And, there was learning experiences and learning curves on that too. It was a great experience though. It didn't work out. I think the record ended up getting shelved, but it was a really cool record. And we spent a lot of time on it. Had Nashville cats all over it. And it was cool.
That was in 2012.
No, that
Or was it
that
before?
was the one. That was later on. I was working for Keith Stiegel, and Keith Stiegel's camp was producing some
Okay.
Uncle
So
Kracker.
this other one was back early.
Yeah, this was Michael Bradford
2005,
yeah,
6,
Michael
I mean.
Bradford was the producer, and he yeah, that was like 2005 or 6, and it was a great learning experience. And Michael Bradford was really cool to me. Like, after the Uncle Kracker record, he ended up flying me up to St. Louis with him, and we did another person's record, and I worked with them on Eurythmics, which that's the thing about or Dave Stewart. He was producing Dave Stewart, and so I engineered a bunch of stuff on that for him too, and I never got credit for it. That's the thing. It's like there's so many things you work on that you never really get credit for. But
Well, I was asking you that yesterday. I hadn't looked at all music in a while, but I was asking you, is that still the standard, and stuff just doesn't get reported?
Well, especially now too, because we were talking about the other day, and we mentioned it, just like so much stuff is coming out and just saturating the market, and companies like AllMusic have, they've downgraded their staff, I think, and they're just not really keeping up with all that.
Right.
And I guess they feel they don't really need to. But there's other companies coming out that are trying to pick up that slack, and credits are a big thing.
It is. And it used to be for me, and that's a sad part of the digital thing, is that would be the first thing I would do when I get a album, is flip it over and see who did what. Who produced it, who played on it, who wrote the songs. I mean, you don't see that now,
I know. And that's something
you have to actually go. It's hard sometimes to find. If you wanted to find out on who engineered this album, it's kind of hard to do,
Well, that's something we talk about on the P&E wing committee all the time. It's like the P&E wing of the Grammys is the producers and engineers.
And you're a board member with that?
I'm a board member of that, and we meet every few months or something, and that's been really cool getting involved in the community a little more like that. And that's a huge topic. That's something that is really getting talked about. It's like these credits are everything.
And it's not just music nerds like us. I think there are normal music lovers out there that just would always would look at that stuff.
Yeah.
And you would buy records. I think I certainly would, and I'm sure the general consumer would too. If you like if a producer, you would buy stuff by a producer, even if you didn't know the artist, because they have reputations and they have a sound, and that is really unfortunate. Kelly Clarkson, do you remember working with her?
Yeah, that was through Ronnie Dunn. I was Ronnie Dunn's guy for a few years. I'd go out to his barn, record his vocals and be part of his team, and he was doing a duet with Kelly Clarkson, so I got to track some vocals for that.
Don Henley, Cass County, that was that country record he did.
Yeah, that was incredible. That was over a long. I remember the first session I ever had with that was at Sound Kitchen, and that was like 2009 or 10,
really,
or something, 9 maybe.
And that album came out in 2015.
15. Yeah, he spent a long time working on that record.
Yeah,
I mean, there was a lot of songs cut, I don't think any of the songs we cut on that 2009 session went onto the record. And that's the cool thing about, guys like Don Henley and, really creative, talented artists that have a lot of money too.
Yeah.
Is they can hire people and keep people busy and
I also
music,
saw you had done some stuff for the Eagles. So was that
was the end, that kind of same thing I was talking about. Like, you kind of, they have a bunch of stuff going on. So you kind of get to start working on all sorts of things with bands like that.
Were you doing reissues or remaster, or what were you doing with the Eagles stuff?
Let's see, what did we do? There was some remixing stuff, and I did a lot of editing for them.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a bunch of like live radio stuff. I think they did a live what did they do? They did a live concert on Sirius XM, I think.
Okay.
And they played it at the Opry House. And so they got a big recording truck and came in and made a huge production out of it and did the show, and it was great. But then, all the work happens after that where you kind of start digging in and putting together the whole show and mixing, like getting it ready to go to mixing and all that kind of stuff. So I did a bunch of that stuff for him. And same with Don Henley's stuff too, there was a bunch of live performance stuff that just needed to get put together, properly. Cause it's not like a lot of people think, you just put up some mics and record a live show. It's like, you can do that. But if you're on that level and you gotta be picky about what you release and how well it's put together and how well it sounds and stuff like that. So there's a lot more work that goes into stuff than just, we just threw up a couple mics and recorded it.
Yeah. Well, the Eagles and Don Henley are famously known for being perfectionists.
Yeah.
Did you notice that?
I did. I experienced that very much. Yes, I did.
Well, I mean, if you made that cut, that says something about you,
I was very honored to get to be part of that team. I think, the cool thing I think about is like, there's only like 2 or 3 guys in town that actually get some Eagle credits,
Yeah.
And I'm luckily one of them. I got to be part of that team.
That's a good album. I love that album.
Yeah.
There's he does some good stuff. He does a duet with Dolly Parton on there that's really good. What was that? Do you remember the name of that song? I'd have to look it up.
Oh, I can't remember. I don't know.
Really good track.
There were so many on that Cass County record.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There were so many. I mean, gosh, Mick Jagger was on that.
Yeah, that's right.
Jamie Johnson sang one with him.
Yeah.
I think
I need to listen to that whole record again, but the Dolly song was really good.
Yeah.
All right, just a couple more of these. Chris Janson, what else? Dustin Lynch. And you've been nominated for more than one Grammy.
Yeah.
Do you remember what that was for?
Well, there's my first experience with Grammys was not a real positive one because it was the credit thing again. It was BB and CeCe Winans. And again, this is where I got burned. I didn't do my homework, and I knew the name BB and CeCe Winans.
Yeah.
But I thought they were both sisters.
Yeah.
Because I just wasn't plugged into that world.
Yeah.
And so when BB came into the studio to do vocals, I was all set up and ready for 2 vocalists.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. BB came in.
Yeah.
And he's like, he's cool. He comes in, he's like, all right, man, like, I'm going to go out to the mic and warm up a little bit. And I'm like, oh, okay. I thought he was the producer. And he starts singing, and I'm like, okay. And I asked his manager was with him at the time, just dropping him off or making sure everything was cool. And I turned on him like, when are BB and CeCe getting here? And the manager was like, that's BB. I'm like, oh. I was a total idiot. I was young, I camped out a whole week with them, doing vocals in the studio, just me and them. And BB was producing.
Yeah.
And he was very cool, and he was tolerant of my youngness, but he was very cool about it. But then the record came out, and I just kept on working, moving on other sessions, plowing through. Like, I remember it might have been a year later or something, the record came out, and I was talking to one of my friends, and they're like, they mentioned BB or CeCe Winans and how I'm like, oh man, I got to do a session with them for like a week ago.
Yeah,
got vocals on this record that they were doing, and the guy looked at me like I was, and he was like, the BB and CeCe Winans record that just came out and won the Grammy. I'm like, oh, it won a Grammy? It's like, yeah, and this was like a year after.
Yeah,
it won a Grammy. I just didn't pay attention to it, and so I went on All Music, and I'm like, I don't have a credit on there, So I went to the Grammys, but I did have all the rough mixes that I would send to BB every night.
Yeah.
So I went and I listened meticulously to the vocals on the rough mixes, and then listened to the record, and they were the same vocals.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I cut those vocals.
Yeah.
And I went to the Grammy department here in Nashville, the chapter headquarters, and I'm like, man, I worked on this record, and And she's like, well, let's look it up. And she's like, oh, you've got a lot of credits on here, blah, blah, blah. And I don't see those though. And I'm like, yeah, but I have rough mixes. I'm like, that won a Grammy. What do I need to do?
I want my Grammy.
Yeah. I'm like, I want a Grammy. And they're like, sorry, it's like, if it's not credited, then we can't.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, well. So I dropped it, and I kind of, I think I missed out on a Grammy, not because I wasn't paying attention, but because I was just so ignorant. I think they were just kind of like, that kid doesn't even know who we are. Like, screw that kid, Or maybe I just got lost in the shuffle. Because, those files were getting passed around. And later, I've worked with BB quite a bit, like doing a lot of editing and vocal tuning and stuff for projects he's working on. And, I've realized that those records go through a lot of different hands while they're getting made.
Yeah.
And so maybe I just got lost in the shuffle or whatever. But yeah, it was a bummer. But there's some other ones there's some other records that have been nominated that I did mix or track or, work on. So, and they've been nominated. I haven't won one yet.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's not true. The Dan and Shay thing won Song of the Year.
Okay.
And I'm not sure I was eligible for that because there's certain rules with Grammy. It's about, like if it's Song of the Year versus Record of the Year, who's eligible for the Grammy? It's the engineer, also
producer,
the recording. So I have a credit saying Grammy recording staff, but I didn't get a trophy, which I checked into it because I did write the Grammys about it and I'm like, I did work on this and it's credited, I do have a credit on All Music for this. And, the woman wrote me back and was like, oh yeah, you sure do. Okay. We'll look at, blah, blah, blah. We'll get back to you. And I was like, oh, cool. I'm going to get a trophy. And then I just never really heard anything. And I think I checked in one more time and someone said, well, it's a different category and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So,
well, you're going to get one of those trophies one day.
Yeah, probably. I hope so.
It would be. You're one of the thing about you, Matt. You're like the most humble person. It's like we all get together and talking or whatever and hanging out and like, hey, I just finished a song, and you're over here like working with Willie Nelson and everybody, and you're just like, oh, tell me about your little song that you did, and you're just not. That's a cool quality to have, and I suspect that has no small amount to do with your success. So you don't make a big deal out of it.
Well, there's so many. The thing is like there's so many other people that have credits like you. Like all of our peers and stuff.
Yeah.
We've all worked in major studios and have all these cool credits, and been involved in stuff. And it's like why would you ever brag, especially in a town like Nashville? It's like, why would you ever walk around like, oh, I've worked with blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. No, I just mean just with your friends. You're, you're like, because I've learned more about you in the past 40 minutes than, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's a good thing. That means you're, and I don't have anything to brag about. I've never,
you did a show with Cake and hung out with him. That's a cool band.
Yeah. I met that same night Rick James.
Yeah, I've heard that story. Yeah. That is hilarious.
That was a weird night. But man, I'm really glad that you did this, and I appreciate you coming on here. And supporting me and Chris with this new podcast. And
yeah, man.
Hopefully, I think there's a lot of people out there that will love hearing your story, and maybe you can come back at some point. Yeah, and after you get that Grammy, and we can talk about that.
We can geek out a little more on gear and
we could talk about that too. There's probably a whole lot of people out there that would like to get in the ins and outs of microphones and all of that stuff. One quick thing. I remember you did a session with Steve Martin.
Yeah, I'm still
working with him.
Currently
with Allison
Brown. And Vince just working on a song right now with Vince.
I just heard a song on the radio the other day called Bluegrass Radio.
Yeah.
Did you work on that song?
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. Did Steve Martin write that song?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that came about because I was working with Alison Brown on her record, and she's greatly admired by Steve and as a banjo player.
Yeah.
And by everybody. She's
Alison Brown is, for people that don't know, they need to look her up. Phenomenal banjo player.
Just so graceful on her instrument. Such a beautiful tone. But they did a song together on that record, and they co-wrote it together, and it's one of the coolest songs on the record, I think. And I think other people gravitate towards that song too.
Yeah.
And it went number one on Bluegrass
it's
Radio.
it's kind of funny song. I mean, it's
no, not the Bluegrass Radio song.
Oh, okay.
But this is on Allison's record. It's a serious song. It's a beautiful song.
What is it called?
Foggy Morning Breaking.
Okay.
It's on her.
I'll check that out.
Yeah, it's a really cool song. And so that went number one on Bluegrass Radio, and Steve was thrilled about it. And so he wrote a joke song about being number one on Bluegrass Radio.
Yeah.
And that's where that came from.
Yeah.
And I think Bluegrass Radio went number one for, on the charts too.
Yeah.
So Steve's great. He's such a creative guy, man. He just keeps coming with ideas, and Allison's just, they've been working together on stuff, and it's really, really fantastic.
My buddy Aaron works with Steve. He's in the Steep Canyon Rangers now.
Oh, yeah.
And so he gets to fly around to those gigs with Steve Martin and Martin Short. And, I went to one of those and went backstage. And,
oh, cool.
Yeah, I didn't talk to Steve Martin, but I was standing right by Martin Short. And
yeah.
He was talking to somebody else. I was going to talk to him, and I turned around and he was gone.
Yeah. Those guys are pretty serious dudes. I mean, they're focused.
Yeah, that's from what I understand from my buddy, who I would love to need to get him on here. He's like, they're funny, but they're working hard.
Yeah, they're not screwing around.
Yeah. Well, man, I really appreciate it, Matt. It's good to see you again, and it's good for to hear all this stuff. And man, you've had a pretty amazing career when you start to look back on stuff like this. And
there's been a lot of different chapters. That's the weird thing about music industry too. Is like, you don't just ride one wave all the way into shore. There's multiple waves to catch. kind of thing, and you got to be resilient enough to see them coming and to take advantage of opportunities. And it's definitely, I think that's a skill set in itself of being in the music industry. Some people that are in long-term music industry
to figure out how to recreate yourself and adapt.
Change with the times, make new relationships, morph into different roles. And I mean, it's never just, I'm an engineer and I'm Matt Coles and I'm an engineer. It's like,
well, you've produced some stuff too, right?
Yeah.
We didn't talk about that.
Yeah.
I looked up there was a record you produced from this guy a couple of years ago, and I read a review of it and I listened to it. What was the guy's name?
I don't know.
Miles or Mose?
Mose Wilson.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's great, man.
That's a good
he's
record.
Awesome, yeah.
And you produced or co-produced that?
I produced that one, yeah. That was his debut record, and he's talented as hell and awesome dude. And he's gone on to produce other people's records too.
Okay.
And actually, he's hired me to mix some stuff, that he's producing. So he's a great guy, man. Yeah.
Well, I certainly have had fun over the years playing with you, playing drums. Are you still playing at all?
Yeah, I just right now there's a guy named Sean Rivers, co-producing with another good friend of mine, Josh Waters, who's amazing. Josh plays with Chris Jansen guitar.
Okay.
He's also his musical director, and Josh is one of those guys who's been around Nashville for a long time and knows everybody, and and been in worn many different hats. Yeah. And just a really well balanced, knows what he's doing music industry guy. And talented musician too. And and Sean's a great writer, and we've been kind of co-producing stuff, and I've been playing drums.
Recording drums.
Yeah. Recording drums, and I'll set them up myself and go out there and I'll hit record, and I do the count off thing in Pro Tools, and then run out to the tracking room and hop on the drums and then play them. And
well, and speaking of, we were talking about before, Chris, who's producing this, our mutual friend Chris, who's sitting over there off camera, We did a song together a few years ago that turned out pretty good.
That was awesome. Oh man, that was just like on a whim,
totally out of my wheelhouse, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a pretty heavy.
It was a heavy riff,
rock.
wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was cool though, because it was cool to see you kind of push on to the edge of, what you were used to doing.
Yeah, it was fun to get. We should write together again. That would be fun.
I love it. That's one thing too. I'm always up for playing and collaborating and jamming or whatever, hanging out. It's like you don't really get to do that much anymore because everyone's so serious about careers and, I don't just go and play guitar and jam for fun. I'm a professional.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I certainly miss
we
music,
did all those parties where we just put together the chicken parties and
those are highlights of every summer we've ever
put together 20 songs and go play them one time and never repeat them again.
That's so fun. Gosh,
and singing, you were singing, everybody was singing, everybody's playing.
That's something I've been doing a little more of too. I went through a phase where I was like a background singer for demos. Okay. And like I also engineering. Yeah. But then, the production house would be like, throw some backgrounds on there too, because they discovered I could do that. Yeah. And they could save money and I just charge them a little bit extra. And it was great for me. And so I was doing that for a while. And then, I just fell out. I fell out with that music production company and nothing bad. It's just, things change and shift and morph. And but yeah, I've actually started to sing a little more again. It's been fun. I mean, I've always sang on my personal stuff, but it's the Steve Martin stuff, and he writes these songs, and then Allison will write music to it, or they'll co-write music together to it, and they kind of got to get these words working. And so as Allison and I are creating these demos, she's like, can you just sing these lyrics?
You're doing the Steve part.
I'm doing the Steve part. It's really cool. It's been fun.
Yeah. Well, I need to come up to your place. I remember when we were writing that one song, we were sitting, you're up by the lake. With the house that you just bought, you said. And this is a good time of year to be sitting on a porch with some guitars trying to
anytime
put something together.
Come on.
Well, thanks, Matt. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Absolutely. And, thank you guys for having me. That's
absolutely.
Very cool. Very cool.
All right. Appreciate it. All right. That was Matt Coles. I hope you all enjoyed that. A great interview with a great person. So thank you for joining us on the podcast today, and we look forward to seeing you next time.